And welcome everybody to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for state and local level political news and talk from a constitutional and conservative perspective. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider, and we're coming at you today, Thursday, June 8th, with a fantastic show for you. A photo has recently resurfaced of Annie Beshear with the Kentucky chapter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, a anti-Christian activism group that has certainly landed Beshear in some hot water because, well, how can you be a Christian while you entertain people such as these? Camp Beacon, a camp for LGBTQ youth, has the first camp of its kind here in Kentucky has been launched. We'll talk about that and frankly how ridiculous this is getting. Additionally, as well, let's see here, we got Eric Deters has indicated he is looking at running against Thomas Massie for that Northern Kentucky congressional district. Something that a few have speculated for a few days. Certainly not surprised to necessarily see it, but we'll see if he ends up doing it. We'll take a look at those numbers. And then finally is all throughout Annie Beshear's governor time, Republican Legislature has seemingly failed to message properly on what Beshear has been doing. It's not just me saying that. Anybody involved in politics, anybody who talks with Republican Party of Kentucky, whether it's behind closed doors, sometimes even out in the open, they'll admit that they have not messaged well against Beshear as he's done, taking credit for a lot of work they've done. Will that come back to bite him? We'll give you some examples and talk about that and so much more here on today's show. Starting us off, these Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Let me tell you, why is this resurfacing now? Well, first, the Dodgers have decided, so this became a big thing because the Dodgers decided to give this anti-Christian LGBTQ activist group a award for Community Hero Award. Now, what is this group? This group is people who dress up in drag, men who dress up in drag like women. They call themselves a activist group promoting human rights and promoting indulgence, perpetual indulgence. That's the point. The entire point of what they do, dressing up in these nun outfits, making fun of the Christian religion, is entirely to attack the faith and beliefs of Christians. And what do they do? Well, let's take a look at these events here. According to their website, these wonderful events that they have coming up, that the San Francisco Dodgers, they felt a need to give them this community award for having wonderful events like the Juneteenth beer bust at Onyx. I guess the Juneteenth beer bust together with Daddy Ray's annual Father's Day beer bust. Essentially, I guess that is an event centered around black gay men, getting together and being black and gay because it's Juneteenth. So the black part becomes important to the event, of course. They also have a trans soccer game. They also, they have drag shows, of course, plenty of drag shows going on, a peep show, as they call it there, bingo. That's nice, bingo there. Just really a good plethora of events centered around who you're banging and who you're getting it on with. And literally their group is dedicated to indulging yourself in whatever you want, throwing a pie in the face of Christian ideologies that say that an individual should have self-discipline and should live a disciplined and meaningful life, engage in monogamy, male-female relationships, raise a child, because of course that just creates healthy societies. But of course, celebrating this downfall, the LA Dodgers given this Community Hero Award because they have lost their way, because nothing builds a community like a group of people whose main focus is indulging yourself in whatever weird, strange fantasy comes into your mind. In their case, dressing like nuns and making fun of Christians. And so they came under fire. Well, it turns out this photo surfaces from back in 2020, reminder photo. Now, actually, I'd seen this photo. I think I showed this on the show last week, but it's a photo of Andy Beshear standing with the Derby City Sisters chapter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And frankly, it is obscene that a person who is a quote-unquote deacon at his church would go ahead and host and show such niceties to a group whose stated purpose, whose stated reason for existence, and the whole reason why they do what they do is to make fun of his faith. But yet, there he goes, standing with them. Of course, Daniel Cameron had this to say about it. He said, the fact that he would host an anti-Christian hate group that makes fun of people of faith is disqualifying for public office. And this November, he's going to have plenty of free time to hang out with those people, but it won't be in the state capitol. And then he also said this is another example of how out of touch Andy Beshear is with our values. He's the governor of Kentucky, not California. Now, at the time of the stories I'm reading on this, we haven't seen Beshear make a statement on this. And as I said in some of my shows last week, look, this LGBTQ thing is certainly going to be a heavy weight around Beshear's neck all throughout this campaign. We talked about the possibility of a transgender person running as a Democrat for the state house there in Lexington. We've talked about the fact that, I got attacked by the left for showing Beshear's love for drag shows and how that somehow made me bad. But yet here Beshear won't host a drag show, of course, because he knows that would drag down his campaign. That's what he knows. And it certainly does show. Now, a person could try to argue, well, Beshear didn't know who he's taking a photo with, but that would not be accurate. They were garbed out. They had indicators of who they were. They had their faces painted with the transgender face paint, showing how they felt. One of the individuals he's taking a photo with here has quite a lot of pins on his jacket, indicating his belief and his viewpoints. And it's right? I mean, this is a conservative state. See, if a Democrat's going to win in Kentucky, they have to show they're not like these California Democrats. They're not like these national level Democrats that have given away to the LGBTQ gender theory cult. That is the number one thing that is driving away former Democrats in the rural area from the Democrat Party. You go out into the state, you talk to individuals who used to be Democrats that are now Republicans. This is the reason why. This is the number one reason why they're switching. It's these kind of crazy ideologies, and then having individuals making fun of the Christian religion and to host them. It's quite out of order, and Beshear needs to come out, and at the very least, he needs to apologize for what he's done. But instead, he's probably going to try to ignore this. Certainly try to run away from it. We'll see if he's able to get away with it. I don't think rural Kentuckians are going to be so okay with his continued track record of these far left crazy ideas on the LGBTQ stuff. Speaking of which, Camp Beacon. Camp Beacon is a new summer camp, specifically for those youths that they feel it was underrepresented. The founders of this camp say, well, we found out you had to travel thousands of miles to find a camp, especially for LGBTQ people. Now, I'm going to harken back to something I talked about earlier this week in the show. If your goal in life is to have these general sexual minorities, these LGBTQ plus to people, to be treated the same as you or I, generally speaking, you wouldn't want to set aside a specific camp for them. But let me tell you what this great camp's idea is. First, let's talk about the first reason why you should never, if you are a good parent, send your child to this camp. This camp is for children ages 13 to 17. Okay, 13 to 17. Now, 13 to 17-year-olds is an interesting time for youths. I know it's when a lot of kids are having different changes with their bodies. In this case, these children are having different changes with their bodies, and that mental confusion mixed with horrible parenting and the buy-in to lies has caused them to identify as something different. But regardless, it's a very confusing time for youth, but it's also a time where we see kids, if left together, maybe doing things that we wouldn't, if we're good parents, want our children to do. There is a reason why you don't allow male-female sleepovers, but in these ages, because we certainly know what will happen. But they're having these 13 to 17-year-olds. Now, this leaves a question. Any discerning parent who cares slightly would say, look, when you have a situation where we're mixing all these different gender identities and sexuality preferences together, well, how are we going to divide up the kids? And they said, we're not. We're going to have gender-neutral dorms and bathrooms. So to say it another way, what this camp has done is decided to take a bunch of 13 to 17-year-old teenagers and throw them all together with no regards of who might be messing around with who at that young age for a overnight camp. Now, least you think, well, I would like, maybe you're a parent who has an LGBTQ youth and you decide you want to go to this camp, but you are at least discerning enough of a parent to say that you don't want your child staying overnight because, well, you don't really feel comfortable with your 13-year-old sleeping in a room with a bunch of other 13-year-olds who are at a camp that is literally dedicated to what your sexual identity is. That's right. A camp literally dedicated that you're only allowed at if you are attracted to the right types of individuals or identify as something other than your sex you were assigned at birth. So let's say you say, look, I don't want my kids sleeping there. Can you go? No. The website specifically says there is no day camp option. All campers will be required to stay overnight. Now, of course, this also asks us a lot of questions like, well, what will they be doing at this camp? Well, apparently, they're going to be doing normal camp activities such as zip lining, equine activities, arts and crafts, and typical summer camp staples. But also, they're going to have special guests and sessions on social, emotional wellness. Because it's incredibly important. You see, that's what this camp is really about. We can't allow your child to, it's not that they want to send these kids to a special camp. It's not like they wouldn't be welcomed at possibly other day camps or overnight camps. Maybe those camps wouldn't want to talk about who they find themselves sexually attracted to at the age of 13, like Camp Beacon would, something that some would call maybe slightly inappropriate to be having social, emotional, and conversations with 13-year-olds about who they find themselves sexually attracted to when you're an adult. But putting that to the side for a second, those camps maybe, though, maybe the child would end up realizing as it's away from its parents and the people around this child that are reinforcing this lie in its life. And as it spends times with regular children and instead of having indoctrination shoved down its throat, this child decides, maybe I'm not LGBTQ because after all, I'm 13 years old. I have no idea what's going on with my life. And to be left up to me to decide my gender, maybe I'm not this way. Well, at least they risk it. They want to make sure you're sending them to a camp where the indoctrination will continue. And they'll have health, and least you be worried as well that while this indoctrination is going on, your child has a mental health issue. Because, of course, as we know, mental health issues abound for use of this age. You would say, why would they have mental health issues at a camp where everybody's just like them? Well, because what we see when we're looking at the stats is nearly 45% of LGBTQ youth have thought about and contemplated suicide over the last year of their life. Over the last year of their life, 45% have thought about killing themselves. An awful statistic. Significantly higher than their peers, and one of the highest of any group in our entire nation's history. Some people would try to claim it's because people like me and you who refuse to buy into this lie that you can just change genders or believe it is healthy to be involved in normal heterosexual relationships that by definition are normal because the vast mujarity of humans on the planet engage in, and it's what's necessary to continue the promulgation of our species. But less people like you and me, we're just too mean to them. That will be an argument we so often hear. In fact, we hear these people saying that if we don't allow these children to transition their genders, we are literally killing them. That is something they say. They say, would you rather have a boy that's now identifies as a girl or a dead kid? That is something they say. Would you rather have a living daughter or a dead son? Like somehow also as well that I'm going to suddenly buy into this idea that my child changed genders. That is what they say, but it ignores that in the history of humanity, in the history of the nation, there has never been a group with such high suicide rates. Even some of the most subjugated people in the history of our country, whether that is the Native American Indians, slaves in the South, whether that is other minorities in the country's history of times where it was a racist country. Nowhere has suicide rates been that high, but yet we see that here. But least you be concerned. Don't worry. They have fantastic mental health professionals around. Fantastic mental health professionals such as Casey Lyons, which uses the pronouns it, its. It's its. Several its in there. Two it. So it's it / this is on their profile. Casey Lyons here. It / its. No apostrophe, just its. Is on their mental health team, because nothing says I'm ready to take care of your mental health concerns like having pronouns like it, and its. But least you also be concerned. That's not the only mental health professional. We also have this other mental health professional, Kaylee Gentry, going by they and them. So I don't know if because they and them is plural, if that means that Kaylee counts as several members of the mental health team, or if Kaylee only counts as one member. I don't know how that looks on their roster, but I don't think it bodes well for the mental health outcomes of the children involved in this counseling if their counselors don't even know what gender they want to identify as. Instead, they have decided they're something else and nothing like you or I or me or that other person. Only in this crazy messed up world do we have a situation where people who are identifying themselves as it and its and they them are considered professionals on what is good for mental health. It is their garbage ideas and the promulgation of which is causing these such high suicide rates, because you're confusing them like crazy. You are confusing the ever-living thoughts out of these kids. They are completely confused by what's going on, and you continue to push that, and then you're shocked at these suicide rates. You're shocked at these issues. Don't blame us. It's not our faults. It's the fact that you literally have children who are sitting there and they're confused because they're 13 years old, and your process here is to sit down with them and say, hey, it's tell me your problem. And then you wonder why their problems continue. Eric Deters already going to work, setting himself up for his next run. For those of you who don't know who Eric Deters is, he is a former attorney in Northern Kentucky. He was an attorney. Now he owns a law firm, but he's no longer a lawyer. And so that can get a little bit confusing because he's not a lawyer, but he kind of does some law stuff. He has a show and some other things that he does online. But Eric Deters came in fourth in this last governor's primary. He got about 6% of the vote. He spent about $1 million. He has come out and he has tweeted this. He tweeted out, I am probably, this is all capitalized, I am probably, capitalized, running against Thomas Massie. So probably means, I guess he's trying to draw out that he may not be. But he is just saying he is probably running against Thomas Massie. I am all but made the final decision. That is actually what it says. I am all but made the final decision. I think he meant I have all but made the final. Okay. So I am all but made the final decision. Will you help me? ? If you can't say it publicly, please text. I guess he gave you a phone number there, or email me at eric@ericdeters.com. I believe his DeSantis endorsement, his never standing up to McConnell, and his recent votes and actions make him more vulnerable. Period. I am fearless. Period. I do not need the job like he does. Period. I'm not afraid to lose. Period. I am ready to serve. Period. I believe I am the best option to defeat him. Period. There. I will seek the Trump endorsement. Okay. So he tweets that out. Let's take a look here at this race. First off, I do want to push back on a small thing he said, where he said, I do not need the job like he does. I'm not saying Eric Deters needs the job. I'm not saying that at all. But I think also it's important to remind people Thomas Massie's background. He went to MIT, him and his wife did. They then founded a computer technology company that they then sold for millions of dollars, and then bought a 1,300 acres back in both of their home counties. So both him and his wife grew up in Lewis County. They went to MIT. They came back to Lewis County after they sold their company off. They bought a good chunk of land there. And then he was content with living his life. And then the local ordinances came in, started telling him what he could do with his land or not. He got upset about that. He went to the fiscal court. He got a group of citizens together. And then when the judge executive seat came up, Massie ran for that. He won. He was judge executive of Lewis County. And then when the congressional seat there in the 4th district came up, Massie ran for that and won that as well. So I don't think it's accurate to say Massie needs the job. Thomas Massie is successful on his own because he founded and built up and sold a company. So I do just want to push back a little bit on that just to make sure we're accurate. But does Eric Deters have a chance? So looking at this last election, Thomas Massie got just over 75% of the vote. His big competitor there was Claire Worth. She got 15.7%. And then Alyssa Dara McDowell got 5.2%, and George Washington, his middle name is interesting. That is a gentleman who changed his name to that. Got 3.9%, got about 4% of the vote. So first, what Deters has got to do, if he thinks he can beat Massie, he's got to make sure nobody else runs. Now, Claire Worth certainly isn't going to run if Deters does. And I can tell you that because Claire Worth and Deters are friends. Claire Worth is often on Eric Deters' show. There's no doubt in my mind that if Eric Deters goes to run, then Claire Worth will not run. So you don't have to worry as much about that. George Washington, almost guaranteed he's going to run. He runs often. And when you rewind to 2020, Massie had a primary then as well from a Todd McMurdy, and he got 19% going up against Massie. So obviously Massie got more percentage there, but he himself got more. So one, Deters has got to make sure other people don't run and siphon off even some percentages of the votes. Claire Worth, to get her 15.7%, she spent about $500,000. If Deters spends as much as he normally spends, as he spent on his governor's race, maybe he even spends more, that starts to get a little bit competitive fundraising-wise. Thomas Massie isn't a fantastic, amazing fundraiser, and a big part of that is due to why Thomas Massie is so popular as well. Quite frankly, Thomas Massie isn't a great fundraiser because Thomas Massie doesn't, generally speaking, and this is my opinion, do the bidding of large corporations or special interest groups. He is doing what he thinks is right. Love it, hate it, agree with it, don't agree with it. He is doing what he thinks is right. His vote isn't often bought, and that's obvious in his low fundraising amounts. He is a pretty well-known congressman across the country, like very well-known. But yet, when you look at other well-known congressmen across the country, you see them raising significantly more amounts of money. And a big part of that is because their votes more often are for sale than Thomas Massie's is. Now, why would Deters want to run against Massie? Well, he says his DeSantis endorsement, Deters, of course, runs on a big Trump loyalist platform. Now, this is worth noting in the 2022 election when Claire Worth and Thomas Massie were running against each other. Claire Worth was trying to get the Donald Trump endorsement, and about 2 weeks out, Thomas Massie actually ended up getting that Trump endorsement. But now he's pointing to the DeSantis endorsement, which I think is certainly an interesting thing. Thomas Massie did come out. He did say he supports DeSantis running for president. And so Eric Deters, a Trump loyalist, is going to come in and point that out. And Thomas Massie was hit by Claire on his disconnects from Trump as well. Once again, Thomas Massie doesn't do things because he gets caught up in even political attitudes or things like that. He does things based on what he thinks is right. And sometimes that can look like some issues. I'm not saying everything Thomas Massie does is right. It's not. I disagree with a lot of things he does. However, he is a very independent thinker. Now, when he comes in and says never standing up to McConnell, I don't actually quite understand never standing up to McConnell, as he said in his tweet there. The reason why I have a hard time seeing that is you look at, like, for example, the most recent debt situation. You look at the most recent spending bill, the $1.7 trillion that McConnell kind of rushed through. He was not a fan of that. You look at a lot of the gun control measures that McConnell has put forward, such as funding those red flag laws. Thomas Massie had spoken out about those. So I wouldn't say he never stands up to McConnell. I think he often does stand up to McConnell based upon his votes. A lot of times are quite opposite from McConnell. But this will certainly be an interesting primary to watch. Eric Deters, I think, is going to have to spend more looking at that district, looking at that congressional district in the governor's election. He pulled in 7,000 votes. I'm going to say that, meanwhile, of course, that was in a very divided primary field and everything else, but he's not starting from zero. He's obviously starting for 7,000. He's already got some name ID built up. He does have some negative name ID in the area. I think Thomas Massie doesn't do much worse than 75% if Thomas Massie even decides to run again, assuming he does. And I don't know if Eric Deters can do much better in this situation. Fact of the matter is, Thomas Massie is a very popular congressman, as he should be. Overall, he makes a lot of good votes and good decisions. I think it is, not only is it going to be difficult to knock him off, but also it doesn't make sense to remove one of our better congressmen from Congress. It's like we're beating down somebody who votes more along the way that we would hope our congressman would. The Republican Party of Kentucky puts out a video now attempting to kind of message back against Andy Beshear. So all throughout Andy Beshear's tenure here, he kind of says one thing, the legislature will fight back on him. And then when the decisions the legislature makes goes through, he then tries to take credit for those successes. You've seen this with him doing these check giving out ceremonies where he travels to all these different counties and cities handing out checks of money. As I've said time and time again, this is one of the grossest displays of ununderstanding where money comes from. He comes with these giant checks that then have his signature at the bottom, the Team Kentucky logo, says it's coming from the governor's office. The governor doesn't sign checks. The money isn't his. The money is ours. He shouldn't be celebrating giving us back the tax dollars we pay in, but that's exactly what we have for a governor right now. And so the Republican Party of Kentucky has not done a super great job, or at least the legislature, in my opinion, hasn't done a super great job messaging back. Sure, when you go to your local party meetings, or you go to the Lincoln Day dinners, or you go to the political dinners or political events, you'll hear them talk about it. If you listen to them interview somewhere, you might hear them talk about it, but there are simple things they should have been doing all along to combat this. You know, one thing I've said they should have been doing, and I've said this to the legislators, I've said this to them, and even they admit, yeah, we kind of missed out an opportunity here. Every time Andy Beshear showed up with one of his checks, and they should do this from here on out, every time he shows up with one of his checks, one of his big old checks, the legislative members of that community, the state house and state senate people of that area, should show up with their own giant check wrote from the legislature, then basically pointing out, for the same amount of money, pointing out that they were the appropriators, they were the ones who did that. But in order to kind of message that and push that, we have here the Republican Party of Kentucky putting out this video. Now, in this video, the first half is going to be Andy Beshear essentially attacking the Republicans in the legislature for their budget, attacking them for putting it out before he put out his budget ideas, something he tried to claim was unconstitutional. Little does he know that it wasn't, clearly. I mean, the legislature is the appropriator. But the first half is going to be him attacking the legislature for their budget. And then the second half of this video will be him taking then credit for the appropriations, taking credit for the fiscal stability. Let's take a listen at that.
This budget isn't the best it can be.
Let's back up and say this General Assembly was the first one in history where the House submitted an executive branch budget for the governors without talking to the executive branch. In other words, they attempted to intentionally exclude the executive branch from its own budget. It is unprecedented. It's unprovoked. It's unprofessional, unwise, and perhaps even unlawful.
In the last 4 years, some people have said that I wouldn't be able to get our priorities through a Republican legislature, that we wouldn't be able to get things done.
Our fiscal house is in order, with significant surpluses, the largest rainy day fund we've ever seen, and the best funding for our pensions that they have seen over the last 13 years.
At the end there, you couldn't see it. They said, irrelevant Andy. They called Andy Beshear there the irrelevant, and a part of that is coming from the fact that Beshear has not worked with the legislature at all throughout his entire tenure. He does not work with the legislature. And you could try to point to party politics all you want to about that, but the fact of the matter is even the legislators that have been there a long time, they've worked with a lot of people from different parties before, even they say this is a little crazy how much he doesn't listen to the legislature. And because he doesn't listen to him, because he doesn't engage with them, because he doesn't talk with them, the legislature has kind of moved forward. But you hear him trying to take credit. He takes credit for record high rainy day fund, ignoring the fact that he wanted to take money out of that rainy day fund in order to accomplish some of his fiscal goals. In fact, one of the things I remember from one of the more recent budget fights is he wanted to carve out even more money for teachers' pay raises. Now, what the legislature did was they increased the funding to all schools throughout the state and then told those schools, look, if you want to give a pay raise to your teachers, give a pay raise to your teachers. We've increased your funding so you could choose to do that if you so do so. But what Andy Beshear wanted, in addition to that, remember, almost 50% of our general fund already goes to K through 12 education. But what Andy Beshear wanted, in addition to that, was he wanted to say, well, no. We can't rely on just the local school boards giving these raises to the teachers. You can't just give them more money and then ask them to spend it how they wish and should as an elected board that oversees the schools. No, we need to make them give raises to the teachers. We need to get this in place. He wanted to pay for that out of the rainy day fund. He's wanted to spend a lot of money out of that rainy day fund. But yet, here he is, and you heard him there, trying to take credit for the fiscal position for where that rainy day fund is at. Then you have him talk about the pensions. He not only does he want to spend more and more of our money on special items, just like his dad did. Understand why our pensions are in the issue they are. They're in the issue they are because his dad, Steve Beshear, failed to properly come through and fund the pensions as he was supposed to. His dad had tons of infrastructure projects he wanted to get done, and rather than contributing the proper amount to the pensions, he instead decided to take that money and spend it on whatever boondoggle issue he decided he wanted to. Now his son's in there, and his son's been trying to do the same thing. But yet, there he is, trying to take credit for that. So we see him doing these check ceremonies. We see him trying to take credit for it. What should the legislature be doing, but what can Republicans do to message on this going forward? Well, one certainly would be getting out in front, as I said, doing their own check ceremonies, going out and really showing that. The other thing would be the legislative members going out into their communities and making sure they know that it was them who appropriated those funds. And I don't mean just going down to your local parties, but going out to all the events you can in your local area. If the legislative members that are Republican in these areas, if they want to see Andy Beshear replaced, they need to be getting out and going to their Chamber of Commerce meetings. They need to be going out and getting to their city council meetings. They need to be going out and going to their fiscal court meetings. They need to be going to all the meetings that they can, such as that, making sure everybody knows the good work that the Republicans in the legislature have been doing, while at the same time sharing the message that this was not a result of Andy Beshear, that Andy Beshear has made himself irrelevant in the process because he refuses to work with the legislators. That is what they should be doing. Are they going to do it? Don't know. Are they going to be pushed to do it? Well, they haven't done it yet. Let's see that they do it. If you have a relationship with your local legislator, state house member, state senate, call them up, encourage them to do the same. Encourage them to get out there and really be pushing back against Beshear's claims that this is all up to him and everybody should be bowing at his feet. Well, guys, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I appreciate you tuning in. This is your only show that you have that does a daily take on the political news and talk going on around the state, giving you action items, things you can do to follow through. I just gave you one. Call your legislators, call your state senators, those types of things. You can make a big difference in these issues. Unlike the national issues, they're harder to make a difference in. But these local issues, you can be the difference. Remember, all politics is local. Once again, I'm Andrew Cooperrider, host of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Just search Andrew Cooperrider. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much. And we will see you back here tomorrow with another episode. Have a great rest of your day.